This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Business taxes. We're stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on turbotax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
I do talk freely about the DNA test because I think it's an important conversation because there's been just so much taboo with secrets and affairs. I think over the years we always look at the couple in question, but what about the child? You know, what about what's going to happen to them? Like we've seen in Facebook groups, we've seen 60, 70-year-olds doing these DNA tests and then they find out their dad's not their real dad. Luckily, I'm so strong and resilient to not lose myself in that anger, betrayal, hurt, where you could just fall down that rabbit hole even deeper. It's given me a good perspective to open up, because if you don't open up, who are you going to invite in?
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. Welcome to the 100th episode of DNA Surprises. Okay, technically I've had more than 100 episodes already, but this is the 100th DNA Surprise story I've had the privilege of sharing with you all. So, in celebration of 100 episodes, I thought we'd take it all the way back to the beginning. In this week's episode, I'm joined once again by Yvette, my very first guest on the podcast. I am eternally grateful to those season 1 guests. They responded to my call for guests with no guarantees on how their stories would be told or where. They trusted me with one of the most difficult experiences of their lives, and that's where this all began. If you haven't listened to Yvette's story, I'll give you a quick recap here, but I encourage you to pause this episode and go back to season 1, episode 1, Yvette's DNA Surprise. It's linked in the show notes. In our first conversation, Yvette was coming fresh off of her DNA surprise. She'd figured out who her biological father was and actually remembered meeting him one time in her life before he died. She had connected with her newfound siblings, but hadn't yet had the opportunity to meet them. Yvette had also gone no contact with her mother because of her anger and pain about the secret. One of the biggest sources of joy in her experience was her ethnic shift, with the discovery of her Sicilian heritage. Yvette felt immediately connected to her ancestors when she learned about this background and immersed herself in learning all about the food and culture. One of the biggest sources of her pain is around the missed opportunity to connect with her biological father, who she seemingly shared countless similarities with. That was nearly 2.5 years ago, and in this week's episode, Yvette joined me to share where things are now. She shares how she's continued to navigate her ethnic shift and build deep connections with her Sicilian roots. She also gives a surprising update on her relationships with her siblings and tells us where things currently stand with her mother. Be sure to listen all the way to the end of this episode to hear Yvette give advice to her past self. Thank you for sharing your story with us again, Yvette. Thank you, Yvette, for joining me today. It's good to see you again.
Thank you so much for bringing me back. What a journey. What a journey it's been. What a journey. It's been just over 2.5 years since we spoke, and so much has happened and in that time.
Why don't we just pick up where we left off? What has happened since then?
So I have 4 older half siblings I never knew about. I've got 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and I'm only barely in contact with the oldest, the one that I reached out to when I was on the path looking for my biological father and information about his family. And I have not met them, and that's because that's been my decision to not meet my older siblings. Predominantly, my reasoning for that is because I just don't feel like I have a connection. Unfortunately, we've had separate lives. We never grew up together, and I think that the pain that they've known about me for just over 17 years, and me only finding out 3.5 years ago, I wouldn't know what to say or do if I met them. I think I've asked all the questions I needed to know about my biological father and his mother and his background. They don't know much about our grandparents, I should say. And I've done a ton of research on my journey, and I just feel like, well, what have I got more to say? What have I got more to ask? It just feels like there's just 2 different worlds, and that's okay. That's completely okay.
I think that's something that we don't always hear about, and I think it's important to talk about, right? So many of us, we're very eager to have this connection with our biological families, and we're really excited. And sometimes they are welcoming and sometimes they're not. And sometimes we talk about how it can be difficult to build relationships with them. But I don't know that I've talked to too many people who have ultimately kind of decided this just isn't a fit. Can you talk a little bit more about how you got to that place?
Absolutely. I think there's what I have found on my journey with my surprise DNA test is, to me, there's this romanticized version where you do the DNA test, you get the shock that, oh my gosh, I'm a different ethnicity, or my father's not my real father. Who's my real father? And there's this massive 7 stages of grief. And I think this is what I have seen and read, is that there is a union of meeting the other side, and, there's a bit of, pain, getting to know each other, but then it's all, woven in that person's tapestry. And it just seems to be a bit of a general story when it comes to that. I don't feel like that, because so much pain has come out of my story. I have discovered so much more in the last few years than just the DNA test, and things weren't right. I know everyone's different. Everyone's journey is different. Every healing test is different. Everyone's processing is different with it all. And I just went, gosh, mine isn't written like that, because I did hold on to a lot of anger and pain in the first few years, the deception from my mother. And then I have not spoken to her at all. It's been 3.5 years since I've spoken to her, and because her mother, my grandmother, knew the secret too, and I confronted her, and she denied it to me that she knew. I haven't spoken to her since either, and that was Easter, just over 3 years ago. I have been very bitter with that, a lot of resentment. My walls have just gone up. I don't allow people into my personal circle as much anymore. And I've just really protected my heart through this process. It took me a long time to forgive my mother and my grandmother. It took me a long time to forgive my father too, my biological father. But in saying all that, I'm not this hermit that has pushed my whole family away. This whole discovery has actually brought my stepfather and I a lot closer, which has been quite beautiful, a very beautiful relationship between a father and a daughter. He has just been so supportive. There'll be times I'll just call him and cry going, I can't cope today with it all. I'm angry with mum. I'm angry with everything. And he's just the most cool, calm, collective man, bit of a voice of reason, and helps me out and just listens to me. Since we're talking about family, I actually did tell my son last year in October.
And how did he take it? What did he think?
When I told him, I said, Dimitri, there's something I've got to tell you. And I said, I remember the DNA test that Mummy and Daddy did, and then Mummy was crying a lot. People were coming over to check in on me. Mummy was talking so much about her side of the family, and I told him, and he goes, Mum, he was like staring at me with the biggest, widest eyes going, Mum, this is such a crazy story, he said to me. This is so crazy. But then he goes to me, because he calls him my father Papul, which is grandfather in Greek. He goes, but Papul's your real dad. You know, your real father's not your real dad. Papul's your real dad. And I could not believe that. He, like, no matter what, he still sees him as his real grandfather. And I think that is just one of the most beautiful, mature, open-minded things he has ever said to me.
And it really just goes to show, right, that kids can handle this information. We can tell children the truth, and they are wise, and they can take in information and process it and understand how it changes or doesn't change their relationships. That's really great.
And I think honesty is everything. I'm glad that I told him sooner rather than later, because I think if I kept that for another 5 years because I thought he wasn't ready, he could have turned around going, Mum, why didn't you tell me sooner? And I thought it was really important because we did go to Sicily last year for a month. Dimitri wasn't as excited as most 11-year-olds at the time are. Entering preteen, he thought at first it was a bit of a boring trip. He just wanted to be back home in Sydney with his friends. But now it all makes sense why we went there, why I went to my great-grandparents' village to research my family and connect with the land that my Sicilian side became so disconnected when they immigrated to America years ago. So it was quite a lot for my son to tell him, this is one part of your lineage and this is their story and this is why we're here. But he's taken it in very well. I'm really impressed.
That's wonderful. Let's talk more about your trip to Sicily, because when we last spoke, you were really leaning into that part of your DNA surprise and learning more about your heritage. And I remember you talking about how when you're finding these recipes and cooking your recipes, you felt a very deep connection to your ancestors as you did that. So how is that going and what was your trip like?
Yeah, so one of the main reasons I honed into my Sicilian heritage is because my biological father was a product of an affair as well. And my grandmother had an affair with an American soldier who was my grandfather, and he was first generation American Sicilian. So I felt that there's been a generation of disconnection from that line, that heritage. And Sicily, from what I've been learning, is such a rich culture. And I really wanted just to delve deeper and connect, because my grandfather was such a mystery and I found him. Out of all of my relatives, I look like him the most. And his mother, my great-grandmother, just looks like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed version of my son. So it's just incredible. I've got one photo of her, and it's amazing how my son and I we're just cookie cutters of my paternal lines, not just a Sicilian line. And I just really wanted to connect with that side, and something inside of me, some fire was burning for me to go to Sicily. So I ended up learning a bit of Italian because no one in Sicily talks English. So that was really nice to learn that as much as I could. And there was just something in me going, you need to go to Sicily. And I was getting reoccurring dreams to go there. So we made a big trip of it. One of the big reasons was I wanted to go to my great-grandparents' village. I wanted to get some more research. If I meet relatives, awesome. If I don't, I understand, because most of them are in America now. But I did connect with a cousin from MyHeritage, another DNA testing site. We got connected and he messaged me and I said to him, I'm actually going to Sicily. I'm going to stay near you. And he said, we've got to meet. And we met.
Oh, how was that?
It was so lovely. Like, he's actually from my great-grandfather's side of the family when I figured it all out. And I didn't tell him about my surprise DNA test. And when we were catching up for a coffee, he goes to me, why did you take the test? And so I sent him an article of mine that was published in Australia going, this will answer your question. It was just so nice to meet his little daughter. She was very excited to meet me, very excited to have family in Sydney, because they all assume that the family's in America. So it's exciting to have someone new.
Yeah.
And it was just really lovely. Someone I don't know, but you feel connected. And it's just so weird that I've got family on this little island in the Mediterranean, but it all felt so natural and normal. And that was a really lovely experience. I'm so grateful. But I think I'll tell a really short and sweet story of when I went into my great-grandparents' village. So I was staying near there for a week, and to get to our villa, we were staying we had to drive through to get through there and check in. And my husband goes, well, why don't we stop in your great-grandparents' village since we're driving through? I said, let's go to the street my great-grandfather grew up in, because I had the street name. So we got there. And so my first steps in this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere in the countryside was in my great-grandfather's street. It just felt like I've been there 1,000 times over for centuries. It just felt so right. And there was a group of people in the street just staring at me. And my husband goes to me, why don't we go and talk to them and see if they might know if you've got any living relatives? I said, they don't know English. How am I supposed to talk to them? He goes, I've got the Google translator in my phone. Let's go and talk to them. So he did it for me, going, oh, look, my wife is Sicilian. Her great-grandparents are from here. Would you happen to know anyone with these last names? And he rattled off my great-grandparents' last names and their parents. And one man just piped up and he goes, look, let me help you. And then we got talking, and then we knocked on a few doors asking, are you related to any of these people? And they were like, no. And I said to him, look, it's over 100 years ago. You know, people have probably died, they've moved. It's all good. And then he goes to me, where are you staying? And I'll try and get some information on your family for you. I said, oh, that would be great. And then he contacted me. We started talking on WhatsApp because my Italian is horrible. So it's just easier to use WhatsApp, use a translator. And he sent me a bunch of information on my great-grandfather's family. And he said, you do have a really living relative, but she's not in the village at the moment. She's on holiday. But he goes, but don't worry, I've booked an appointment for you to see the council, because that's where all the records are of all, like, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates. And I said, oh, that's awesome. Like, thank you so much. A few years ago when I was looking for my grandfather, I reached out to a girl in the village on Facebook to see if she knew anything. But at that time, I had a fake name of my grandfather because he gave my grandmother a different name. Because what soldiers do, they give false names so they don't get tracked down by their lovers that they've hooked up with in the war. So this girl and I, we stayed in contact because she said to me, we could be indirectly related, but you look like one of us. But then I eventually told her who I was and who my great-grandparents were. We didn't meet, unfortunately, in Sicily. She was out of the island at the time, but she said to me, Yvette, have you gone to the council yet to do your research? And I said, oh, I'm actually going tomorrow. She goes, oh, wonderful. And when I got there was these two men standing outside, and I waved to them, and they came up to me, and it turned out to be my friend's father and his friend, and we just got talking. So we went upstairs to do the research, and I got my second great-grandparents' marriage certificate, and I'm looking at it, and then he goes to me, my friend's father, he looked at me, he goes, Yvette, we're cousins. And I went, what? And he explained to me how we're cousins. And all I remember was we're just looking at each other with tears in our eyes, and I just could not believe it. And then my new friend that organised the appointment, he came running upstairs, and he looked at my cousin and he looked at me, and he's like, how do you two know each other? And he explained it, like the whole few years in a nutshell. And my friend just looked at me going, you found the right people. And I sure did, because in my journey of researching my family, this Sicilian historian published 2 books on the genealogy of the villagers in this village. It's from like the 1600s to 1990. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get a hold of these books. I could not find them anywhere. I was looking at Italian forums, Facebook groups, contacting bookshops in Sicily. They're like, no, sorry, it's sold out. No, it's out of publishment. And he gifted me these books. That was his parting gift for me. I just could not believe it. My journey of pain, deception, betrayal has become a romantic Sicilian story of connecting with not just the land, but with relatives and making friends. Like, I have never felt so home in a village. And I am saying this with like so much assertion, because I have been to Greece, as my husband's Greek. My son is of half Greek heritage, and I fell in love with the islands when I went there. And I've been to Croatia because my mother's Croatian, and again I felt connected, but it wasn't the same level of like feeling home in Sicily. I don't know if it's because I've not known about it for 35 years, and I don't know if it was something that was missing from me that's always been there. But walking through the village, I was looking at everyone, and I've never seen so many little girls and women my age that look like me. I have never had so many people come up to me just asking who I am. Is your family from here? What are their last names? And then they start going on the phone, talking to their friends to find out if they know anyone. It was a real homecoming for me. I just can't wait to go back, especially with the friendship I made with this particular man.
Are you still in touch with him?
Yes, yeah, we're in touch. He's like the uncle I never had.
Oh.
He's waiting for us to come back, and he took time out of his day to help me out. And that's something that people wouldn't really do.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's just incredibly generous. And, to your point, it is this beautiful story of, you searching for the truth and not getting it from the people that you're closest to, and then finding it from strangers like across the world who just welcomed you with open arms. That is so incredible. When are you going to go back?
I want to go in a couple of years' time. I just fell in love with the island so deeply. Just those little pockets of moments. When I was in Western Sicily, I was in a beautiful little village called Marsala, and my husband and I went to the beach for the day, and I went for a swim on my own. I just remember floating in the ocean, and I just started crying, and it just felt like this baptismal, like the ocean was just embracing me. Like, finally, you're home, you're here. And it was just like everywhere I went, because I saw most of the west coast of Sicily, and then I saw a few places in the south coast, and then we went to one city in the east coast. Every place just felt just right. Like, everything just made sense.
That's so beautiful. It brought tears to my eyes when you said that.
And I'll never dismiss my biological paternal grandmother's heritage as well. She's got Czech, Jewish and Middle Eastern heritage. And some people go to me, oh, Yvette, how come you don't embrace the Czech heritage? You always talk about the Sicilian. I said, because when I found out I was part Czech, I was at peace with it straight away because my favourite authors are Czech. And the Czech, is a Slavic culture and heritage, which is very similar to Croatian, the South Slavic heritage. If I want to look up on, like Slavic gods and goddesses and mythology, it's the same. I'm already connected. Like it's already there. I don't have to go, oh, what do I need to know about the, Czech history, or what do I need to know about?
Of a shift as what you
Exactly.
experienced. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to ask you, I think for some people, there is a bit of guilt with maybe not feeling that instant connection with the family and not wanting to pursue a relationship, or maybe even wanting to, but it just not feeling right. How did you come to terms with that and feel okay with it? Because you seem, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be like, it's on me and this is what I've decided and this is what's right for me.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses. I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
How did you get to that place?
I think when we did our DNA tests, and it was a massive shock to our system, our way of life, our life has been narrated for decades. You at first go, like there's a lot of anger, like a lot of piercing, burning anger where you go, how could our mothers do this to us? How could they deny not only of us, of our biological father, but our ethnicity? Because we've got a bit of layers, you and I, Alexis. It's not just we've got a different father. We're connecting with ethnicities that could have been buried and we would have never known. Mm-hmm. And our DNA, our spirit inside would have been screaming for it until the day we died. And there's that first space we've got to move into with this anger, rage. There is victimizing. How could they do that to me? What have I done so bad in this life to get through that? And I think I realized I had to take accountability of my actions and choices, because when I got to the point, look, what happened 39 years ago, because I'm now 39, I could never have controlled the narrative. I wasn't even born. I didn't make that choice to cheat and have a child and hide that from them when the child was questioning it. That wasn't my choices and decision. That was my mother and my biological father and my grandmother. And I had to come at peace with that, going, I can't change what happened. I can only change my outlook on everything and what will bring me peace from all this. And what joy can I get out of all of this? With the whole decision of not wanting to be in contact with my immediate family, there were some things that were said and I didn't like. But obviously I didn't express it going, hey, I don't like that, but I internalized it. And it just didn't sit right. Like it's like, what if I met up with my siblings, what can I possibly say and add value to this new relationship? Like, it took a lot of, toing and froing like a pendulum. even my husband will question it, going, why you want to be in contact with your extended family and not your immediate family? And I said, because I want to know more about my family. My siblings can't offer that to me. They wouldn't be able to. I think there's still a bit of pain as well, because not only do I look so much like my biological father, we have a lot in common, and that really pained me. We basically studied the same degree, and when I finished my degree, I wanted to be a diplomat. Like, I wanted to get into that avenue, and I found out my father was a diplomat. Was his career when he immigrated to Australia, and I was just like, is this a sick joke? And then I learned more about him. He knew 5 languages, and I'm up to my 4th language, learning a language. His favourite food was goulash. That's my favourite food. How can I have so much in common with someone I didn't know? I still sit there and I spin out sometimes going, we've got so much in common. And I'll share a story why I'm still so horrified. When I was emailing my sister in the early days to find out about my family and get some photos and, asking all the general questions like medical history and things like that, she sent me an email that he sent to her when he was dying of lung cancer. And it was about a book by Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis. Have you read that book?
I haven't.
So in the book, it's about a man that morphs into this really ugly insect. And he was describing that in his email to my older sister. When I read that email, I had a nervous breakdown reading it, because 10 years ago I had severe postnatal depression, and I tried to take my life from the severity of it. And I got put into a psychiatric ward. And there was 2 things I brought with me to the psychiatric ward. One was a notepad and pen, and I brought 1 book from my whole book collection, and it was Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis.
Oh, wow. Oh, that gives me chills.
Still shatters my bones to this day, and I've only told a few selected people, and they can't believe it. They're mortified. Like, how do you have so much in common with him? And there was missed opportunities to meet and ask him a zillion questions about my family. I think for me, I just kind of checked out when my older sister started asking me questions, like, because my father was a practicing Jew, and she said, I wonder where the Jewish is from. It's like, I don't know. I didn't grow up with him. If you had that curious questions and you had him in your life, I'd be asking all those questions. Like, maybe I just think differently. I just don't understand why are you coming to me when I just found out. But I did my work. Like, I used to ring up synagogues going, hey, I've got a few questions. Like,
I remember that. I remember when we spoke, we talked about like Judaism 101 or something, just so that you could get like the basics, because you were curious about that part of you.
And I think that's just been part of my personality. If I want to know something, I just ask. I found out from my great-grandmother's side that none of the women lived until, I think they all lived until their early 60s. They all died of heart attacks and strokes. That's so important to know, those little things, because my whole life I thought I was going to live until 100, because on my dad's side there's longevity. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and we've kept in touch, through a few emails here and there over the years. And you mentioned that you've been on like a really emotional journey. Is some of that, the finding even more parallels between you and your father, a big part of that? Is there anything else that's been difficult for you?
My mental health has been horrible. I think that's something we don't really talk about because of that journey. You do the DNA test, it's all shock, anger and stuff, but then some people connect with their family and then it becomes like the healing journey can happen. And I don't have that, unfortunately. All I've got is emails and books and, photos and stories and clippings from Ancestry, and I can't ring up my grandma and go, hey, can you tell me more about the Jewish side and the Middle Eastern side? Tell me more about that. I can't. Like I've mapped out her father's side, the Czech side. I've mapped that out until the 1600s, that family. And it's just like you go into these deep spells of trauma. And it's not something that you choose to do. It just happens. For example, like everything was all fun. Like I was on a high from my trip in Sicily last year. I was on a high from it for months. And, you know, when you come back from a vacation, you go into that depression for a couple of weeks and it takes a while to get back into your normal state. It took me months. I felt like I left a lover, you know. I'm pining for him. I'm pining for this island. And so everything was great. You know, I told my son the truth. It just dawned over me over Christmas, depression. I went into this state of, you know, the running of the old movie in hope that my biological father was going to knock on the door on Christmas Day and say, I'm here. And it just was so painful. It's like, how do I get out of it? And it's so frustrating because I've been to therapy and I'm the first case of this surprise DNA test for them. So they can help me with my childhood traumas. They can help me out with identity, but not this event that I went through. And it was just, I just felt so alone. I just felt really, really, really depressed and anxious. It wasn't the feeling I had when I had my P&D. It's a totally different feeling. It's like your soul gets put into a different dimension and you're looking back at your journey and it's like, what am I doing? Am I working too hard on this, on my research? Am I pushing the healing too fast? And then it affects me as a mother, as a wife. It affects all of those relationships because my husband's probably thinking, why is she like this? She's gone to Sicily. She's learning the language. She's cooking. She's connecting with relatives. But it's a really lonely journey. Last year, I did connect with someone in real life in the flesh that's had a similar journey to me. We met at work and she found out when she was 19, her dad wasn't her real dad, like one of her siblings told her. And so she's in her mid-50s now and she's been my rock. So when I do go through these spells, I go to her, is this normal? She goes to me, Yvette, it's only been 3.5 years. Like, give yourself some grace.
Yes.
Just everything I say, like, oh, I don't want to meet my siblings, or I'm still angry, and she'll go, that's okay. That's okay. Like, she gives me the validation I've already given myself, but I needed to hear it from someone else who's gone through it in a similar sense.
I'm so glad that you were able to connect with someone in person. It really does make a difference. You know, there's so many wonderful online spaces, and I've connected with so many people through the podcast, but the people that I've met in person, it's just a totally different kind of experience to like share space with somebody who's gone through it. So I'm really glad that you found that.
Yeah, because there's no like resources, like there's no conventions, there's no big things that is happening, and maybe I should start that. But I've just been so deep in my healing and I have been greedy in that sense because I need it. I need that time out. I need the time to cry if I need to, or if I want that joy, I'll crank up the Sicilian music in my lounge room while I cook. And I'm just forever discovering things.
What is next for you? I mean, you're 3.5 years. We're almost the same. We're about the same time. So I feel like we've been kind of going through this on the same timeline, similar timelines. What is next for you as you move forward?
I want to learn more Italian, so I'm more proficient when I go next. I do want to go to America one day to find out a bit more information on my great-grandparents because they worked in the cotton fields in the turn of the century when they arrived. And then they moved up to Buffalo in New York State. And I heard there's a big Sicilian community there. So that would be really cool to go up there, pay homage to their resting places. But I don't know when that trip will be. I don't know what's going to happen next. I am studying counselling now. I'm doing my counselling course because I want to help people with their surprise DNA tests here because there's a massive gap. There's no one here that specialises in it, and I think that's really important. If I can get through these next few years and heal a bit better, then I can definitely give back to those who are struggling. I don't know. I'm such an impatient person, Alexis, that I just want everything to, fall into place, and I just want things to make more sense. But I know that's not the reality. I think, we just want to be healed so quickly from it, as in, we want that pain gone. We want those tears to go away, but they never will. It's not like, a family member or a really close friend passing away and you go through those motions of grief of losing someone and longing for them, and then over time, their anniversaries might be teary, or you might remember a fun memory and you laugh and cry at the same time. This is just so different for me because I'm grieving for, the lost time with things. I grieve that I never knew who I was on a ethnicity basis, but then I didn't know my father. I didn't know my grandparents. And I feel like that's all been robbed and taken away from me, even not knowing my siblings. People will go to me, well, then why don't you connect with them? It's like, well, I don't know what to say.
I really want to just thank you for acknowledging kind of the range of feelings that people have as they move through this, because, like I said earlier, not everyone maybe will feel that bond with their newfound family, and that's okay. We're all different, and it's okay for us to just honor how we feel as we move through this.
We know who our friends are. We know who our family is, and family's not always blood.
That's true, right? We definitely learned that through this experience.
I like to see everything as a case study and go, okay, what's going to bring me joy? Because if I start holding on to this hate, toxicity, that's not going to be good for my journey and healing. That's going to put me back to square one the first week of opening the DNA test, and then descending into not just the rabbit hole, but the steps of hell. It's just, you can't. It's okay when you feel that pain, let it out. But I'm not going to be the same person I was 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. We're not going to be the same people that we were when it started. And I think a lot of times we hear, you're still you, you're still you. And yes, we are who we are, and who we are is changed. Yvette, thank you so much for joining me again and sharing an update. I can't say enough. I have so much gratitude for you trusting me with your story when I was just a fresh DNA surprised person, NPE, reaching out in Facebook groups going, does anyone want to tell me your story? Because it really has helped me feel so much less alone in my journey. And I know, like I said, you have helped thousands of people with your story. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for allowing me to share my story on your platform, on your space, and giving this opportunity for us surprise DNA test people, because we're not just from an affair, we're from a donor conceive, we're from adoption, one night stands, you name it. And it's just a very, very different, we see the world very differently. We've got a different lens, and what's the one thing that connects us humans is storytelling and the lessons from these stories. And We need that. We need to make sense of it somehow. So listening to these episodes from time to time gives me fresh perspectives too. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
After Yvette and I had our conversation, I thought of one more question I really wanted to ask her. As you know, every episode I ask people for advice for parents who are keeping DNA surprises from their children, as well as for people who recently uncovered a DNA surprise. For her update, I wanted to know what advice Yvette would give the version of her who first appeared on the podcast, the Yvette of October 2021. Here's what she said.
What advice would I give to the Yvette back in October 2021? The best is yet to come, and don't beat yourself up with how little you think you have come, because in fact, you have come such a long way with all the research, asking the questions, reaching out to people, for the answers that you have been seeking for. I just want to let the Yvette of 2021 that I am so proud of her, and just to keep going. Don't let anyone dictate how you should be handling this, how you should be healing. Everything you are doing is just the best you can do. And there's no textbook or rule book to say what you are doing is wrong, or you should be taking it another way, or reacting how you have been reacting, because I can tell you something, that there's just so much more you are going to discover over the next few years. It is going to blow your mind away, and it will all make sense. Trust me.
Thanks once again to Yvette for sharing her story and for trusting me with it straight from the beginning. Stay tuned for more updates from past guests this season. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, submit your story at dnasurprises.com. Until next time. This episode of DNA Surprises was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auersalt. It was mixed and mastered by Josh Auersalt of Siren Recording Studios.